Welcome to an Aries and Pisces walk into a coffee shop, the podcast. We're your hosts. I'm Bridget, she, her.
And I'm Tiffany, she, her. This is a podcast where two friends let go of perfectionism and talk unedited. I'm curious about what your brain's doing.
I'm also curious about what my brain's doing.
Hello.
Hi.
Brain, what are you up to?
I think I have this thing when I'm reading or scanning through something that I say, for example, in a chapter book, if there's maybe the number and the title and maybe a little thing underneath of it and then the body, I skip everything up top and I just go right into it.
Okay.
And then I have a really hard time reading menus.
I was just about to say, I think I remember us talking about this because the menu situation was
when
difficult.
we were on vacation, I was I can't, I can see the menu, but I can't read anything on it because I'm all over the place. And that, my friend, is what happens every time I go to hit the record button on here. The big record button. It's the biggest button and it's the first button. But I look at every other button and I'm like, where is the record button? And that's why I almost hit the leave button, because the leave button is on the other end and it's also red.
Interesting. So your brain just says, we've been trained to go left and right, but why should we ever? It just does whatever.
It starts in the middle.
That is both cool, but sounds frustrating because everything is set up to be read from left to right, top to bottom. And if your brain is just no, over here though, it does get confusing.
Yeah. And for a long time, I thought that I had dyslexia, especially with numbers. It gets very confusing with numbers. And my dad has dyslexia. So I was just oh yeah, okay, this makes sense. But then it didn't quite fully feel like it fit.
Did you ever get tested?
No.
You might have a form of it. There's different types. I don't know all the types, but I know different people experience it. Not every person has the exact same experience.
Interesting.
So maybe it is a form of it, possibly.
Well,
if you haven't ruled it out, and especially having someone in your family with it, that might be a factor. Yours just might be on the, I don't know if it's a spectrum, but the way you're saying it sounds like you get by, which means maybe it's a more mild form on the spectrum versus someone that I can't get by. This is disrupting how I, look at everything. Are you good at spatial awareness stuff?
Just
out of curiosity,
my gut answer is no, but what do you mean by that?
Well, I remember reading something once talking about how people with dyslexia, because that 2D reading thing wasn't a strong suit, their brain then is really good at spatial awareness. I was talking to a friend that has a more severe case of dyslexia, and they were like, yep, that's me. Do not give me a page to read, but I can visualize a whole, he's very into architecture. He's I can visualize a house
this
from top,
so
all in my head, and that's fine, but reading's hard.
Yeah, no, I cannot do that. This makes me think of when I took my first semester of college when I was doing engineering, and I had to take an engineering 3D drawing class. And I had to go in all the time for tutoring. I would just cry over it because I couldn't envision 3D shapes. I have a really hard time with it, spatial things. I have a hard time picturing something unless I can actually physically, I can't picture setting up a room differently unless I actually move the thing and see it.
Right. I have a hard time with that. No, well, okay, so when I can visualize a space, but my problem is if I'm just looking at furniture pieces and then looking at an empty room, I have no idea if anything's going to fit in the space. I can make it fit in my head and be like, it would be really cool if this shelf was here and that couch was there. But I don't, even if I like try very hard, and sometimes I'll even try to use my body and I'm like, well, I know if I lay on the couch and I know if I lay against this wall, like, and still my brain goes, but will it? And it's both. It's like, I can't, like, I've definitely done it on either side where I'm like, it's totally going to fit and it doesn't at all. Or I'm like, that's never going to fit there. It's too big, only to find out it's like half this space that I thought it was. Like, there's no consistency.
Yeah.
It's not like, oh, I always underestimate. It's all over the place.
Okay. Yeah, I feel like that. Like I could like try to picture something, right? But like when it comes down to actual like physical reality, I really have no clue. It's the same thing with time. Time doesn't make any fucking sense.
Agreed.
But for some reason this is really like stuck in my head that it wants me to tell you that with the like maybe dyslexia or maybe not thing, with numbers, I get a lot of anxiety, especially with thinking about large numbers or like a number with a comma in it. I just have like huge anxiety around, do I know, excuse me, like what that number is, like 100,000, or if it was like 110 and then 3 more zeros. I get very anxious. I'm like, do I know what that number is or what that means? Or when like on social media, people start putting like, if you put like a K, if you put like 12.1K, I just panic. I'm like, I don't know what that number like, and this is all very humorous to me as a person with a math degree.
That is what I was going to bring up. Like, this is so fascinating because I didn't know you had that. And I think because I'm like, Bridget likes math. Bridget's into numbers. Bridget's good at numbers. She did a whole thing about it. And I also have a lot of anxiety. Mine's slightly different than yours, and I know where it comes from. But like, not in a million years would I have pursued any degree in it. I wouldn't have voluntarily chose to keep on studying it. So for me, I'm like, yeah, numbers are ridiculous, relatable. But to hear you say it is so weird to me because I know you also really like them and are good at it. Wow.
Yeah, it's excuse me, wow, my voice today. Yeah, it's very interesting to me. I think math is so much fun. I love like solving the equations, but maybe that's why I like algebra so much, because it tends to be like a smaller thing, like mixed with a symbol, and you're not necessarily using like gigantic number. I don't know. Anyway,
that does make sense to me. Part of why algebra isn't that upsetting to me is because
that it isn't that upsetting.
A lot of math's very upsetting to me, but algebra doesn't seem to be as much because it was my algebra teacher that looked at me and said, there's no reason for you to be failing these tests. You answer the questions correctly in class and you do all your homework. So do you have test anxiety? And I was like, what do you mean? And then she started listing things that might be happening. And I was like, yeah, that does happen when I look down at this paper and suddenly it's like, I've never seen a number before in my life. And so she was the one that diagnosed me with that basically and helped me, like gave me extra time, worked with me so I can get my anxiety levels down so that I could take the test along everyone else, like in a normal time frame. And before that, I was always kind of just given the inadvertent message that I was just kind of dumb at math because no teacher ever looked at me and said, I don't know why you're testing so poorly when your homework's so good. Like, And I didn't know either. I just knew that when I looked down at this piece of paper, all the information was out of my head. And even when I would push myself and like get through the test, I'd make really simple mistakes because I was in a panic state the whole time. And once I figured that out, and that teacher never made me feel stupid. So when we were doing homework and if something really was confusing, she would keep on finding different ways to explain it to me until it clicked. And then it kind of just felt like a puzzle to me.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Now, if you ask me why algebra is important and what we use it for, it was a puzzle. I don't fucking know. Like I have no, and maybe if someone started explaining it to me, my memory would get jogged and I'd be like, oh yeah, that sounds familiar, or oh, I could see that. But just straight up of just like, my only memories are once I memorized a thing and got good at it, it did feel satisfying because puzzles can be cool. Yeah. But I don't know its practical applications.
I mean, I also couldn't tell you like the practical applications. I also haven't, like when did I graduate? In 2011? Like
time
that was
weird.
So long ago. But problem solving, like that, it's excellent problem solving skills. And that, I think like that helped me to be able to do, like that way of thinking, like just helps me be able to like solve other kinds of problems, I think. And I think that didn't hit me until like way later, just because like everybody tends to say that, right? Like, what's the purpose of math? Why do I need to learn this? Like, well, I'm never going to use it again. And I think especially me with like a degree in math, and then I didn't necessarily like pursue that in like a career form. And I had to kind of like come to terms with that with myself of like, what did I get out of the whole entire college experience? And I got a lot out of it. And yeah, I was like, I'm excellent at like at solving problems and things like that. And like, yeah, I can, it doesn't, I think that was the cool thing of like, doesn't have to necessarily be this exact concrete thing, that like I could have gotten other things out of it, and like, and that's cool. But that, Tiffany, was so sweet of your teacher like that. I like almost like teared up when you said that. That was like the sweetest thing ever. I wish that like, yeah, I'm gonna say like I hate school, but like I hated school. It was so hard, especially with like ADHD, but also like not knowing and not being able to sit still, and yeah, all of the anxiety. And like I would always listen to this one song on repeat in my headphones up until the second we started taking a test. And I was like, why can't I just listen to this song while I'm taking this test? Because I was like, it was the only thing that could keep me from like just freaking out and not being able to take the test. And yeah, being able to have that like extra time, or like someone to like work with you and be like, it's okay, you're okay, it's okay if you need to do this differently. Like, oh my gosh, yeah, I just feel like things would have been like easier, or like less stressful maybe, or less of a, yeah. Oh, I think you're muted. Welcome
Sorry.
back.
Hi. I thought I clicked it. I did mean to mute because there was someone talking right outside the window I'm standing next to, and I was just like, you might be able to hear that. I'm not sure, but just in case. Anyway, yeah, that was profound and literally life-changing for me, because I spent years of school with this deep shame that I was bad at math. And it was so funny because all my other classes,
hey,
city living, hey, what a time.
What a time. I can't wait till I move to the city and then we've both got it going on.
Chaos reigns. She was the first teacher to look at me and ask me like what was going on in complete non-judgment. Like she was on my side immediately. She's like, I know something weird is going on because this is weird. And I know this because, and like gave me evidence of why I'm not an idiot, which I did have teachers try to help me before, but there was this kind of like, I don't know how to describe it. I guess they were at a loss, so I felt at a loss because like teachers before, like I think the idea was that they thought I should just be able to do it, and because I couldn't, they didn't know why and how to help me, which is funny now because like in 6th grade I had all A's in my classes except for math, and it's like clearly I'm not someone that isn't working hard or trying. And so it's just like curious to me that it took me so long because I was like fully in high school when a teacher finally was just like, I think something's going on here. And I had that trend all through school, all the way up to her. And she was the first one to be like, maybe this means something that we can work on. And then I used that throughout my whole rest of my high school into college. Like every time I started like having that same feeling of being at a loss and not understanding something, I'd be like, oh, okay, let's reset. We need to regulate. Like, I'm a smart person. I can do this. And it was her voice that started that. It was really profound.
I love that. I love that so much. That feels, even just hearing that feels very healing to like my little inner person in there.
Oh,
Thank
I'm
you. Thank
glad.
you for sharing that.
Of course. I've been doing that time, speaking of time not meaning anything, I've been doing a lot of what I'm just calling like time travel healing, where I'm engaging with things in a way, or engaging with things for like younger versions of myself. And right now it's been a lot of high school where it's just like I think I might have texted you about this, where I was like watching Heartstopper like through my teenage self, being like, what would it have been like to have something like this when I was that age? And it has felt very like cozy. And so like thinking about old teachers that actually were helpful and not harmful to my development and psyche has been really nice.
I love that journey. Also, I forgot that you told me about that show, and I think that I need to watch it, right?
It's very wholesome. I
Yeah.
really enjoy it.
This was like funny too, because last night I was sitting on the couch and I was like, oh my God, what am I going to do? Like, what am I going to do with myself? Evenings are really hard. I like never know what to do with myself. And I was like, I just wish that I had some like Queer Eye to watch. I just wanted to watch like new episodes of Queer Eye, but I've done all of that. And I was like, well, I guess there's nothing for me to watch. Like, so.
Well, I have news for you. The queers are making media. They are out there. They're doing some stuff.
I just I need to make myself like a list and some kind of have it somewhere where I know to like check it.
That helps, because
I
otherwise
need a
you're just trying to
system.
keep stuff in your brain, and that's ridiculous.
Right. Which like, Bridget, hello. That's all like what I do with my business and Notion is like get it out of your brain and put it into a system where you can actually use it. And I know this. However, I don't have like a TV or that kind of a like practice. I don't really watch TV, and I
I
don't
was
really have like it's not like part of like what I do. So of course it feels weird to try to figure out how to do it.
that was going to be my point, that it's not like most people where they're like, oh, I can't wait to get home and sit on the couch and like unwind with a show. Like you've never been that. So of course, when you're like, wow, what do I do with myself? TV is not the thing your brain says you should check out because
No.
historically it hasn't been a place for you to unwind.
No, 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 no. And certainly like, yeah, and in the past I ever used it as like an unhealthy coping thing, like where I was in like
Right.
very like depressive
Mm-hmm.
moments. Oh my God, back when I first got Chloe and she was
Mm-hmm.
a little baby, and
Yeah.
I was like, I would just lay on the couch and we would watch Bones, just like all the like
Oh.
reruns of like Bones. And so there was that period of my life when that was all that I was doing. But even that was like, I wasn't go like search watch. It was like I had a thing to do, and that was it.
Mm-hmm.
And I like
Mm.
couldn't deal with life, and that was all that I knew. And I wasn't like, venturing out and trying to like look for other things to watch. It was like just this. Um,
Yeah.
so yeah, it never occurs to me to like sit down and like open up the TV and like see what's there. And I feel
Right.
like I wouldn't know how to pick something. I would just be like too overwhelmed. And that's where I feel like I need some like a curated little list of like, oh, people like recommend these things, and then I write them down and
Yeah.
check them out.
That's a really good idea. I had oh, that's a thing I could probably use Notion for. I had like a little notes app thing where
Mm-hmm.
sometimes I would jot stuff down like that, like, I mean, any media, so like books or movies. Um, but then I would keep on forgetting that it existed.
Yeah.
And so then I would find it like, I don't know, I would just come across it randomly and be like, I don't even remember who recommended that anymore. So then I started like trying to jot down like who
Yeah.
recommended it and maybe why. And then I'd forget about it. And then it'd be like half a year later. And I'm like, hey, 6 months ago, you said this thing was cool. And I looked at it and it was.
Oh, that's great. I also, yeah, I have a database in Notion that is called my like reading or like media list. And I do save things like that in there, like recommendations, or like when you told me about Discworld and I just copy and pasted your text, a little like thing about it in there. I was like,
That's
recommendation
cute.
from Tiffany. I put the date and I put what you said about it. And then I proceeded to read that first book in 2 days. So then I was
Really?
like, oh my God, what do I do now? I had to like request the next um, couple books from Search Ohio because our library didn't have them. So I'm like,
Mm-hmm.
oh my God, I don't know when they're going to get here. And I can't believe I finished that book so fast. Because
I'm so
usually,
pleased to hear it.
usually like I have a book for the period that the library gives you, which I think is like 21 days.
Mm-hmm.
And I at least renew it once, at least. So
Mm-hmm.
this to me, I was like, I picked it up on Friday and I finished it on Monday. Like I picked, yeah, I think. So like I
Mm-hmm.
was like, how did I finish this book? I don't know. So thank you.
You're welcome. I'm so glad that it worked. Because, like, you never quite know when you recommend a book to somebody if it's going to land. And for you, I particularly have a hard time knowing what will stick or not. Because there's some things that, and not just like books, but like just different things that I'm like, oh, I need to tell Bridget about this. And then every once in a while, it's just like, yeah, sorry, nope, can't. I just can't with that. And I'm just like, all right, tricky. You'll be like open to hearing about it, but it's like
Yeah.
consuming it yourself. It's just like not it. So like Discord, I was like, I don't know. This might not be
Yeah.
it.
Yeah. I I really appreciate though that like that you still share the things with me, because then I get to get out of my stuff, right? And I
Mm,
get to like try the things and to see like, oh yeah, is that for me or not? Because especially with the books, I've had such a hard time. Like the books that I consume are all like information, like education, self-help. Like I'm not reading books just like for fun, for pleasure.
yeah.
And I've tried to do that, and I've had such a hard time with it.
Mm-hmm.
And so that feels extra hard for me to try like another one, because I'm like, it's just not
Right.
gonna go. But this one I was very hyped about, and um weird as all get out and all over the place. And I was like, half the time I was like, I don't know what's going on, and I don't think that I mind.
Yeah, it doesn't matter. It's so
Yeah.
entertaining. And the nice thing about those books is that each book is like that and also self-contained. So it's one of those series that I recommend to people that don't normally read series, because you can skip around, you can jump from like whatever chronological time like the books were published, it doesn't matter, because in the book he'll like kind of like reference things, and if you know, great, it'll maybe jog your memory, and if you don't, or you haven't read it yet, it doesn't really matter. It just adds like a little like flavor, but it doesn't like change your experience of the actual story. It's just so well done.
I
Sir Terry Pratchett was a genius.
I am like, I couldn't understand when I first went to the website and
Yep.
I saw the sheer volume of the books, and I
Mm-hmm.
was like, oh, I'm in trouble. Like,
It
because
does
I
look
was like,
intimidating.
that, yeah. But then I read about, I was like, they're all, you can read them in whatever order. And I was like, how? Then my brain is like, how does this work? How are there
Mm-hmm.
this many books in the series, but I can read them in whatever order? But then apparently there are like specific like arcs that include like some
Yep.
chunks of the books. And I was like, none of this makes a lick of sense to me. And but I used the neat little feature on the website to help you pick a book to start with. And I put like that I was like a first timer and like looking for like like humor or something like that,
Mm-hmm.
and maybe something else, I don't know. And it gave me that first book in the witches arc.
That
And
makes me so happy, because that's normally the book I tell people to read, because it's one of my favorites. It's like,
mm,
because witches, I got
yeah.
so excited when the witches were introduced, and that you just like came upon that through the magic of a little tool on the
Yeah.
website makes me so pleased.
Yeah. And so then I was like, because also here's the thing is that
Mm-hmm.
for me, I would have a really hard time if you were like, don't read these books in chronological order. Just pick whatever you want. Or like the concept of bibliomancy, just
Mm-hmm.
like
Yep.
opening up a book.
Yeah.
No, it feels like it goes against every like fiber of my being. I am like, which this is hilarious talking about the
This is
beginning of
really
our
funny.
conversation, where I'm like, I have to read the book from like the beginning to the end. I can't just pick it up in the middle. So I guess it depends on what I'm looking at.
Right.
From the beginning of the conversation, it's more like I'm looking at like a 1-page thing.
Mm-hmm.
But as a book overall, or like a series overall, I'm like, I'm going to start from the beginning and I'm going to end at the end, and I'm going to go in order. Otherwise, I feel
Mm-hmm.
very uncomfortable about that. Um, so the idea of doing that with this I was like, I'm going to try it and I'm going to see what happens.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and then I decided, okay, well, I'm going to read the rest of the books from like the witches arc
Oh yeah.
in chronological order. And then I'm going to see where I want to go from there. Maybe I'll start at the beginning
Mm-hmm.
and go.
That's what's so fun. There's actual like charts that people made online being like, choose your own adventure, and like they'll list like all the different arcs and kind of give like little like, these are the young adult ones, these are this one, like this other genre. And then they also have charts where they tell you which books cross over into different arcs. So like there's like the witches arc that you'll see, and then sometimes you'll like see the witches as a side character in like one of the other arcs, or vice
Okay.
versa, some character. But again, it doesn't matter, because like the whimsy of it all, like you don't need to know the full backstory of like any of the witches if they pop up in another book, because like they're so fully formed that they show up as a cameo. And if you know the backstory, that's neat and it's exciting. But if you don't, like, it's just as entertaining and doesn't really change. much of the story that you're currently in. It's just so good. It's
I'm
just so good.
yeah, I'm happy to have something that is like that is very just like fantastical. I think this is gonna help me tap into my like daydreaming, like going back to like that
Yeah.
conversation, because I was just thinking about this the other day. I think I wanted to talk to you about it too. That I was like, I feel like I'm still like, I remembered that conversation and I was like, I feel like I'm still not there.
Mm-hmm.
Like I'm still not like accessing or like playing with that. And as I'm working towards like leaning into my like the jester, the like fun, playful archetype, I'm like, I think like daydreaming really, I feel like that's like a big part of it. And like,
Right.
and it still feels kind of distant for me
Mm-hmm.
to try to like tap into those things. So, but I think that having this like media that I'm like reading and digesting, I think
Mm-hmm.
that's gonna like helping to like stir things up a little bit.
Oh yeah, Pratchett as a jester archetype makes complete and total sense to me. Like he has this otherworldly quality, like watching him interact in interviews or the way that he phrases things, like he just cannot be bothered to take this world seriously. And so even the most serious of topics, he's able to not twist, but look at it through a lens of just complete absurdity that it's poignant, but it's also hilarious. Like there are some deep themes in those Discworld books, just calling out like capitalism, colonialism, like status quo for status quo's sake. But he does it in such a way that it doesn't feel heavy handed. You, at least
Mm-hmm.
this is my experience. I never felt bogged down or like that feeling after you read the news. I never had that, even though he's
Mm-hmm.
like talking about some like institutional, like, what's the corruption, like it just is so fantastical and whimsical. And because he is so expert at satire, he'll talk about something so heavy, almost like so straight faced, quote unquote, straight faced, that it's like the absurdity is even more highlighted. And you just
Mm.
end up in stitches about it. And you're just like, oh, humans are so silly. Like, we are so ridiculous. The things that we do to ourselves, the ways that we have set this up.
Yes, indeed. I mean, I even that was like a big thing in this book that I read, Equal Rights. Yeah, because they talk it. It even says on the like cover of it something about like feminism meets like
Mm-hmm.
something, and it was yeah all about how like women can't be wizards because and then they keep saying like because of the lore, like and like the wizards are like but it's the lore, and and then like Granny the witch and this little girl, she's
Mm-hmm.
just like marching in there like well she didn't believe it either but now she's like all about like it's yeah that was very fascinating that that was like the theme of this book. I found it very yeah I'm looking very looking forward to reading more.
I cannot tell you how happy I am. Like my face hurts. I'm smiling so hard. I'm so glad that it landed for you because I love this series with my whole heart and being. I think about them all the time. They've meant so much to me. And I've talked about, like, I know some people like that are like, oh yeah, I'm aware of them. Or like, I know some people that have like read them, but like I haven't had anyone in my close personal orbit
Mm.
like take an interest or like really dive into them. And I'm so excited that you liked it and that you want to keep going. I'm so pleased.
Yeah, I even in that Notion page that I saved this in, I was trying to determine like, okay, well, there's a lot of books here. Do I make a new book or do I make a new page for each book? And then I was like, no, maybe I'll just make one page for Discworld and then I'll keep everything like inside of there. And that's where I mapped out like I put like the next names of all the ones in the arc that I want to read, and then I could like mark them off and like put the dates. And
Oh, fun.
yeah, that felt very fun to do too.
Oh, I like that. That was a really good idea.
Yay.
And I'm trying to remember how I ended up reading them. And I honestly don't even, I think once I hit the witches, I got super stoked and I was like, just give me all the witches. I do think I read all of those in an arc, but I think some of the other ones, I think I ended up jumping around a lot. But I also did like audiobook for those as well. So like for me, it's kind of jumbled because some of them I read, some of them I did audio, some of them I've done both. So like I have vague impressions, but like for different reasons, like why it hit me in a certain way at the time. But I also would recommend the audiobooks because they hire voice actors and it's very well produced. And like jokes that I thought were really good in the books ended up being even funnier in audio, even though I've already heard them because the delivery, like the comedic timing of it all. And I'm just like, this is a delight. It felt like a whole new experience, which I have felt that way about audiobooks before, like ones that I've read and listened to where I'm like, oh, I can appreciate these for like different reasons. But Discworld in particular, it was just like, it added like a brand new layer. Oh, you know what just popped in my head is the image of screen printing. You know when you have like the layers of screens? So it's like the first layer is like the base, and then the more and more layers, it's like the more and more detailed that piece of art gets based on like another. That's how Discworld feels to me.
Wow.
I love it so much.
Did you read all of them?
Yeah, I read all of them and then some of them multiple times, like the witches. I returned to the witches quite a few times. And then later on, there's like a young adult series that takes off from like the witches as well. That meant a lot to me, especially because as Terry Pratchett started, as his health started to decline, he was working on that last bit of the series. And so it meant a lot to me before. And then as his health was declining and he was working on them, it felt all the more emotionally wrought. Like I had a lot of like bittersweetness. And it actually took me a really long time to finish that arc because after he passed, I didn't want it to be done. And so it took me a long time to finally like read the last book because in my brain I was like, okay, if I read this is the last thing that he published and he's gone now and that's it. He's gone. I knew he was gone, but it felt like I couldn't read that book because then he would be like actually gone. And I'm proud to report that he wasn't actually gone after I read that book because there's so many books and you know his legacy's still here. But oh, that grief was so intense. Like I still sometimes get teary-eyed when I talk about Terry Pratchett. Like, yeah, it's happening. Like I miss him. Like actively miss him. Like the idea that this like wild whimsy jester man is not in the world anymore feels so big to me. And yet I can return to those books a million times and be like, oh, right. Like that's still here. Like this jester man is still in the world and like working the magic. Oh, and this is a good example of that. Like this is all new to you. Like you are a brand new person in this brand new world all these years later. And I forgot that for a second when he passed, but that's like how time works. It doesn't mean anything.
It doesn't make any sense. Time is a flat circle, much like Discworld.
Yes, like it just doesn't matter.
Oh, what a delight. What a delight. Also, I'm finding this very fascinating with our own personal talks of like death and grief, and which is much more than we have time to get into today.
Yeah, that's probably
But
another conversation, but it's
yeah.
obviously going to come up. I've been thinking about it for a long time.
Mm. I think it's I am it's interesting to me that I'm like, oh yeah, I think I'm ready to talk about it. And I know just who to talk about it with.
Yes. Hello, it's me. I've been training my whole life for this.
Well, I'm glad we're here.